Hi there, my name is Simon Healey, and this presentation will be looking at the effects of transcranial direct current stimulation, or tDCS, on schizophrenia. Today, I will be covering the following topics: what is schizophrenia, what is tDCS, psychological explanations of schizophrenia, recent studies, and finally, I will identify gaps in current research, as well as make suggestions for further research. According to the American Psychological Association, schizophrenia is a chronic mental disorder characterized by incoherent or illogical thoughts, bizarre behavior and speech, and delusions or hallucinations. According to Orlov et al., schizophrenia is characterized by prominent cognitive deficits impacting on memory and learning, and that these are strongly associated with the prefrontal cortex. According to the APA, tDCS is a form of neurostimulation that uses constant low direct current delivered via electrodes on the head. tDCS works like this. Firstly, a small amount of direct electric is applied to the skin of the head by two relatively large electrodes. The electric current flows according to Ohm's law and depolarizes pyramidal cells at their basal membrane depending on the direction of the current. There are two main psychological explanations of schizophrenia: psychodynamic theory and cognitive theory. In 1924, Sigmund Freud's psychodynamic theory proposed schizophrenia is a result of regression to a pre-ego state and attempts to re-establish ego control. The cognitive explanation of schizophrenia acknowledges the role of biological factors in causing the initial sensory experience of schizophrenia, but claims that further features of the disorder appear as individuals attempt to understand those experiences. I will now briefly discuss 5 recent studies that have analysed the tDCS to influence the psychological mechanisms of schizophrenia. The researchers of this 2017 study hypothesized that tDCS could improve cognitive function of people suffering from schizophrenia. The study found that there was a correlation between the tDCS over 10 sessions and a change in the frontal lobe cortical recruitment during lower demand tasks. The second study that I looked at aimed to combine the two interventions over prefrontal cortex and cognitive training to examine change in cognitive performance in patients with schizophrenia. 24 participants were randomized into 2 groups. The working memory task demonstrated a significant mean difference in performance in the tDCS treatment group. The third study that I looked at found that the transcranial direct current stimulation was associated with increased activation in the medial frontal cortex beneath the node. This showed a positive correlation with the consolidated working memory performance 24 hours post-stimulation. The researchers of this study believe that schizophrenia is characterized by auditory processing deficits. The results indicated that early sensory network deficits in schizophrenia can be altered by tDCS. This 2016 study was the most practically based research paper looking at treating auditory hallucinations. Much like the other studies, this study involved a randomized, double-blind, sham-controlled study that elevated 5 days of daily tDCS of the same cortical targets in 26 AUTS patients with schizophrenia and the schizoaffective disorder with auditory hallucinations. As shown by their studies, there is a number of ways in which tDCS influences psychological mechanisms of schizophrenia. The first study compared neural alterations before and after tDCS, which found neural changes in the frontal lobe. The second study combined tDCS and cognitive training to improve cognitive deficits in patients with schizophrenia. Study 3 showed that tDCS was associated with an increased activation in the medial frontal cortex beneath the node, showing a positive correlation with consolidated working memory performance 24 hours post-stimulation. Study 4 examined the stimulation of the prefrontal versus temporal regions in an attempt to determine which of these had more of an impact on early auditory processing. Study 5 found a significant reduction in auditory hallucinations in people with schizophrenia after 5 days of twice-daily tDCS that simultaneously targeted the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and left temporal prefrontal cortex. Gaps in existing knowledge. The studies mentioned in this presentation have been important in addressing a relatively new area of the applications of tDCS to schizophrenia. Currently, as discussed in the study by Orlov et al. In 2017, there is a lack of effective therapies for cognitive deficits. For example, the 2016 study by Froelich et al. Directly contrasted previous findings in relation to auditory hallucinations and demonstrates the need for further optimization and evaluation of non-invasive brain stimulation strategies. Particular investigation into auditory hallucinations is warranted, as according to Froelich et al. In 2016, 25% of adults with schizophrenia did not respond to any pharmacological treatment. The 2017 study by Orlov et al. Recommends further research into areas of modulating brain networks, as to date, this area is not fully understood in relation to schizophrenia and in particular how this could relate to future treatment methods. All of the studies presented agree that tDCS offers a potentially novel approach to modulating frontal cortical activity, but it is a relatively new area of study. Finally, as mentioned by Froelich et al., consideration of more targeted brain stimulation to engage specific deficits in temporal organization of brain activity in patients with auditory hallucinations is warranted.